Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, as you might recall from last year, I was one of those people who liked World War Z. And no matter what you say, I know I'm not alone because the movie made so much money. But I didn't just like it, I respected it for several reasons. I really liked that it was a more international, sophisticated take on the horror film, the zombie film. It was almost like a Wall Street Journal or New York Times application to it, which I thought was great. I love the worldliness of it. I love the way it depicted a modern family, that seemed to be relatable and current rather than Hollywood's insistence to throw back to the white picket fence days of the 50s and 60s, even today when that's no longer relevant. And I really like that behind the scenes, the film realized that it had a problem and reshot the entire last third of the film. And it worked out. That's so exciting. So often when there are reshoots, for instance, I'm seeing Maleficent tonight, and I'm hearing not great things, and that film had significant reshoots. And often as what happens with Maleficent is, I hope is not the case, but seems to be, it doesn't work out still. There's no saving the movie. But what I love about World War Z is that it did save the movie. So I'm really excited for the sequel, which is very slowly moving along. Now, I've already reported to you that JA Bayona signed on to direct, and I think he's a wonderful choice. He's behind Penny Dreadful with Sam Mendes. He directed, I believe, the first episode. That's doing so-so. But he also did The Impossible with Naomi Watts and Ewan McGregor. Great movie. And The Orphanage, one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. And he's a fantastic director and a great talent, and I think he'll bring that same sophisticated elegance to the film, but yet still be able to bring the scary, which is important. I mean, look at Seth MacFarlane yesterday in my review. I talked about how he was so consumed with making a good live-action film and doing a good job as an actor, he forgot that he was making a comedy. So it's very important to remember everything. You can't lose sight of important factors in your film and just think they're going to take care of themselves. But then yesterday it was announced that they found the writer for World War Z, and for the first time I became concerned. They have brought on Stephen Knight. Now, Stephen Knight, recently we discussed him for Locke. That's his writing. He's both the writer and director on that film. That's the Tom Hardy sits in a car for 90 minutes. I thought the film had its compelling moments, but overall didn't work. So Stephen Knight's very much an indie talent. Who says, let's try and put Tom Hardy in a car for 90 minutes and see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, well, at least we tried. I mean, that's a very indie sensibility to filmmaking, not the kind of person who has a lot of jobs and studio money and people's careers riding on the outcome. Although you could argue to some degree that Tom Hardy had a lot more writing on Locke than Stephen Knight. But anyway, Stephen Knight has also written Dirty Pretty Things, Eastern Promises. So I can see why somebody on paper would say, let's hire him. He will bring the sophisticated nature to the film that we want. But I would say that Stephen Knight is not proficient in genre writing, in genre movie making. And that is very important. Again, just like we're saying with, A Million Ways to Die in the West, forgot it was a comedy, it's very important for World War Z, no matter what it achieves to be, to remember that at the end of the day, it's an action zombie movie. And I think that's what got it into trouble perhaps in the first place, and why it needed those extensive reshoots and rewrites. So the last third of the film had to be redone when they brought in Damien Lindelof. And I think Drew Goddard was also rumored to be involved. And I have to say, I thought that last third of the movie, this is a slight spoiler if you haven't seen it, I think really did save the film. I thought it was great that the first two-thirds were this international, globe-trotting, mystery. But then it was very important that they ended the film in that last third with a more traditional, running amok in a lab. But still, it was, the World Health Organization. I think that it still retained the elements it needed to be true to its ideals, but it got down and bloody. And I love that Pepsi scene. It's still one. I mean, he didn't actually drink a Pepsi to Brad Pitt's credit, but the soda is still one of my favorite shots in that movie. Because who doesn't need a good, cold, refreshing soda when they're running for their life from zombies? I know I would. I could use one right now. I love a delicious cold soda. But anyway, I think the World War Z was a great movie. I think it really worked out at the end. Now, granted, I never read the book, so I didn't have to wrestle with all the changes they made, which I know hurt a lot of people's enjoyment of it. But I'm curious for the sequel. First of all, speaking of the book, For those of you who are disappointed in what World War Z turned out to be, the movie, can you let that go for the sequel, or are you still upset? And what do you think of Stephen Knight as the choice for the writer, JA Bayona, still in love with that idea like I am, as director? And also, what do you think the film needs to be? What should be the priorities for World War Z? Do you agree with me that it needs to have that those genre elements? Or do you think a sophisticated, globe-trotting, intellectual movie is enough? So I'm very curious to what you think. That now you know how I feel about it, and hopefully Brad Pitt has somebody on there. That should just be somebody's job, like an intern. Like, just keep reminding me this is a zombie movie. Just every once in a while, just be like, hey Brad, you're making a zombie movie. Be like, oh yes, thank you for reminding me. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story is that Pixar has released more information about one of their upcoming films, Inside Out. And I have concerns about this movie as well, which I'll get to in a moment. But first, let's hear what the synopsis is. So it focuses on 11-year-old girl Riley, and Riley lives in the Midwest. And then her father gets a new job. Her father starts a new job in San Francisco. So of course, that's a big culture shock to Riley. And of course, not only is it moving from the Midwest suburban setting to a city, but also, of course, you need new friends, new home, etc. Lots of reasons for her emotions to go crazy. And that's, of course, our main characters in the film, the different emotions in her head. You've got joy, which is voiced by Amy Poehler, fear by Bill Hader, anger by Lewis Black, disgust by Mindy Kaling, and sadness by Phyllis Smith. And joy, apparently, the Amy Poehler character, is the lead, who, of course, joy is the most important emotion, etc., etc. And she's trying to make sure that, I guess, Riley is well adjusted in her move to San Francisco. So, a couple of things. First of all, when you see that list of cast members, it's very television. And that is my overall big concern about this idea, and that it seems small to me. I'm only familiar of 2 other times that entertainment has tried to depict what goes on inside our head. There's, of course, the very cultish hit sitcom Herman's Head, which you might be familiar with. That, as I said, cult hit. Not a huge hit, but, it had its fans. And then also Cranium Command at Disney World at Epcot in the Wonders of Life Pavilion, which is now closed, and you can no longer ride Cranium Command. You might be seeing a pattern here that these things are no longer around and weren't around for very long. I enjoyed them, though. However, I will say that they all seem very small. They never had a big scope to them, and so I worry about how this is going to work as a movie. Will the movie also seem small? I think that's something Pixar really needs to watch out for. There is another reason for them to have an intern. Just reminder interns. I've created something new. What would your reminder intern tell you to do? But anyway, I just feel that this seems small to me. And also, the San Francisco setting, I'm surprised there isn't someone better at synergy at Disney being like, wait a minute, Big Hero 6 is taking place in San Francisco. Can you please pick a different city? I also maybe think, with the international audience today, maybe it would have been more interesting. And a little bit, today, is it really that much of a culture shock today to move from the Midwest to San Francisco? Perhaps if she moved to a different country with the language barrier and different culture, different, social interaction, that could be very interesting. And it worked to great effect, by the way, in the Karate Kid remake, where Jaden Smith's character moved to China. So that's actually, if I had to think about it, I wish that they had plussed the movie in that way, not only in terms of the story, but its international appeal. And also, 11 years old is a tough age, I think. Maybe they feel that's their sweet spot in terms of who should go and see this movie, but I think at 11, you're pretty chill. I think you're not a little small child who's like dealing with, maybe another sibling, and I think things don't start to get really tumultuous emotionally until you're teens, maybe. But 11, I think, as I said, things are pretty cool. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story is about Antoine Fuqua. Remember Antoine Fuqua? He made such a splash. I have his box office mojo chart up here. Hold on, let me get it out because it's going to come into play in a minute. But Antoine Fuqua obviously made a big splash as director with Training Day. David Ayer was the screenwriter there, and they've both gone on. And I think they're actually very similar talents in that they kind of do the same thing all the time. David Ayer is finally mixing it up with Fury, the World War II tank movie, with Brad Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, Michael Pena, a very interesting cast. But again, you wonder if it'll just be the David Ayer version of that movie. And I think that Antoine Fuqua has suffered from the similar problem, and that he always seems to make a very similar movie. And then, of course, also, he got stuck in the Jerry Bruckheimer machine, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, because King Arthur was his, and that actually turned out quite poorly. That was really the Keira Knightley show. That was Jerry Bruckheimer, enamored with Keira Knightley, and she said, I want to be a kick-ass Guinevere who wears a leather, girdle and fires arrows. And he was like, okay, whatever you want, Keira. Pirates was such a big hit. You must clearly know what you're doing, because every actress is a talented producer. Not, as we all found out. So King Arthur didn't work out. He had Shooter, that's the Mark Wahlberg movie. Brooklyn's Finest. I saw Brooklyn's Finest. I thought it was okay, but again, very small film. But then he had a little bit of a hit with Olympus Has Fallen. That's the Gerard Butler Die Hard ripoff. Huge Die Hard ripoff. But would be always remembered to me for seeing it not with completed special effects, which was very interesting, but kind of, I think, hurt the movie for me in terms of my enjoyment of it. But I know a number of you enjoyed it, and it did pretty well at the box office, to the point where they're making a sequel. I believe London Has Fallen, but Fuqua's not involved in that. But anyway, as we always discuss in Hollywood, you're always trying to get your next gig off of, before your current gig opens or right after, to always, you always just have to survive, get the next movie. So Olympus Has Fallen allowed Fuqua, he got that because, Gerard Butler, very small movie, nobody expected it to do well. White House Down was supposed to be the winner there between that matchup, and then of course everybody was surprised that Olympus Has Fallen, which got there first to theaters, actually ended up being the big winner. So Fuqua, what turned out to be like, was not supposed to be a great job, turned out to be a fantastic job, a fantastic gig, and got him this movie called Equalizer, which a number of you have been mentioning to me in the comments lately about, why haven't you reviewed the Equalizer trailer? And I was like, I haven't heard of this Equalizer trailer, I'm not seeing it really anywhere. But then when I read this story yesterday that Equalizer is apparently testing through the roof for Sony, I'm going to review the trailer later today. And then I want to report here what it's doing for Antoine Fuqua's career. So, Equalizer, apparently a huge hit. It's him reteaming with Denzel Washington after Training Day. Sony's like, this is great. So they're like, please, Antoine Fuqua, right now, sign on for the Equalizer 2. But Antoine Fuqua is holding off because he actually has a number of offers. And so I think this is great to see Fuqua, who, especially because we don't have a lot of prestige black talent behind the camera right now. I mean, African-American filmmaking, or, I'm sorry, trying to have a politically correct term, is doing better, but, you're not, it's still very genre-y. It's still, encapsulated. It's not blending in with the rest of Hollywood. But Fuqua is one of the few directors who has crossed over and makes films with white leads and is, quite successful. And, obviously black leads. He's colorblind in his talent, which is the ideal situation, obviously. So it was sad when he kind of went off the rails and wasn't really able to make it. So it's great to see him coming back in such a big way. So what are his other offers? And let's decide what we think he should take. All right, so Equalizer 2 from Sony. That's one. The other is a movie called Sub. This is so 90s. Wait till you hear this. It's produced by Ridley Scott, and a South American drug lord forces a disgraced former Navy officer to drive a submarine full of drugs into the U.S. past the Coast Guard. That sounds really silly, and I would not advise Antoine Fuqua to take that project. I mean, apparently Doug Liman was considering it. I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he came to his senses, and I would hope that Fuqua does as well. That sounds almost like an SNL synopsis for a movie. But the other one, this is the one I might be tempted to take. I mean, it's kind of not great to abandon a franchise, or a movie that might become a franchise, so you can see why he might be like, well, shouldn't I make Equalizer 2 if I'm at Equalizer 1? But this opportunity here is really good. The only problem is it's from MGM, and I think MGM has a little bit of a problem publicizing their films, a little bit low on their finances, but wait till you hear this. It's a remake of The Magnificent Seven, and one of the writers on it is Nick Pizzolatto from True Detective. Tom Cruise was at one point attached, but now it looks like Brad Pitt's going to star, and that seems like a fantastic opportunity for Fuqua. Is Fuqua up to it? I don't know. I would think The Magnificent Seven would require a director who was a little more cinematic. Fuqua to me seems, I think he's good with his actors and directing them, but I don't really think he has these sweeping vistas. I mean, you never want to pause an Antoine Fuqua movie and go, I want to put that on my wall. I think his films are more performance-driven. But that is a fantastic opportunity, and I think maybe Fuqua should just be like, okay, I'll step up my game now. I mean, to direct that film is a stellar opportunity. So that's what I would recommend. Take Magnificent Seven remake with the Nick Pizzolatto tie-in from True Detective. It's like, get involved in that. So I'm curious to what you guys would recommend. What do you think Antoine Fuqua should do? All right, so on to today's viewer question. This comes from Jonathan Walker. And Johnny Walker, I guess. I'm so glad Johnny Walker watches this show. All right, Jonathan. I wonder if that's your real name. But anyway, Jonathan, he says, "Hey, Grace, great job delivering us media news and keeping up with it for so long." It's my pleasure, Jonathan. Thank you for watching. I had an interesting question I was hoping that you could ask. Ta-da! A few days ago, me and my dad were watching the news, and a quote-unquote professional critic gave their opinion of a movie and took a massive dump on the movie, that I thought looked hilarious. Okay, so Jonathan Walker didn't think that the review was hilarious. He thought the movie looked really good, and then here comes this critic and just completely slammed it. So then Jonathan Walker continues saying, "Just what exactly makes a person a professional critic, and why do most of them have to give so much hate for movies most of the public likes?" Excellent question, Jonathan. Sadly, there is no criteria for becoming a movie critic. Anyone can do it. I mean, you're supposed to have gone to film school and done and focused in cinema studies. That's where you study the history of film and the evolution of it as a medium, both technologically and creatively. And I did that when I went to film school. I went to NYU Film, and I took cinema studies courses, which actually were some of the best courses I took, and I think were very helpful even from a filmmaking perspective. I think everybody should study filmmaking. And there's actually a fantastic book that was given to me in that cinema studies class, which I'll put a link to in the video description, because I think everyone should read it. It was the most influential and best book I ever read in all of my film studies, and I think it's must reading. It's required reading. But anyway, anyone can be a movie critic. You do not have to go to a school. So you would hope that the people hiring, though, would try to make sure that the person had some experience and knowledge in the area. That's our hope. But I think that professionalism is being open-minded and always, especially with something that's an art form, because that's opinion-based. A rose, it's through the eyes of, I forget the saying, beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. So I think that a professional person should always realize that that's just their opinion. And I think that also by being professional, you need to back it up. But, in short, I think what that person did was wrong. I think you should never take a massive dump on a movie because somebody liked it probably. And I just think it's a really offensive and unfair thing to do. I always try, sometimes we can get a little bit carried away when a movie's so bad and have a little fun with it. But I always try and say, and make it clear that when I'm reviewing a movie, it's my opinion. And I think that everyone should do that because to just say definitively that a movie is good or bad, it's just, it's not true. And also this goes both ways. Even movies that everybody loves, some people don't like. I've seen some of you say that you did not like X-Men Days of Future Past, and I certainly wouldn't, say that you were wrong. How can I? It's your opinion. So I think that a professional critic should take into account that there are differences of opinion, and they should always back up their critiques. I think that's really important. You just can't say whatever comes into your head. You need to have reasons for why you think that. It's almost like making a legal case or winning a good debate. You need to have your arguments, you need to have your strategy, and at the end of the day, you need to say, that's my opinion. All right, so Jonathan Walker, I hope that was helpful to you, and thank you so much for your question. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's 3 top stories, the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.